Hello, I'm Dr. Steve Singer, an associate professor at the College of New Jersey, where I teach deaf education, disability studies, that kind of thing. I'd like to talk to you today about a book that I'm currently writing. It's in the review stage right now, but I'm not going to talk so much about the book, but the development of the book, which I think could be applicable to many of our autoethnographers and narrative people who study narrative in general. Uh, so the title of the book right now is "It's Just What I Did: An Autoethnography of Disabled Decision Making." And so to give you sort of a context of what drove me to begin this book is look at this scenario. There is a new surgery that would restore sight to a woman who became blind at the age of 2. She decides, I don't want to have that surgery, but it makes her friends confused and angry. And they don't understand why she wouldn't want to have that. Um, if we look at this more closely and you think about it, the blind girl or woman, uh, she's lived her entire life as blind, and so she's constructed her knowledge of herself and her world and her relationships and her behavior all around being blind. And so why changing that would be possibly traumatic, right? Uh, you know, changing who you are. Maybe she fears the unknown, or maybe there's a cost associated with the surgery that she's unable to bear. Uh, Maybe she's afraid of the pain or the outcome of that surgery. Um, just learning a new life, pragmatics, like learning how to be sighted and to negotiate her new world. Uh, and maybe her income is associated with her blindness, and maybe she's a blind advocate or those kinds of things. And also, people who have disabilities are feel this constant pressure uh, to become able-bodied, and there's a feeling sometimes that you have to resist that influence. So in this scenario, who knows why exactly she chose? But if we just sort of look at face value, we can't even begin to understand why she did that. Uh, and so I encounter these kinds of things all the time when I'm teaching, is I say something to students and they're like, why? Why wouldn't they do this? Or why would they do this? Or if I were in that situation, this is what I would do. All right. Uh, and that last part of this is what I would do is how humans or our readers create meaning. They draw on their personal experience. They have these schemas that they've created around disability, about life, or anything. It's like their idea of what those things are. They receive new information and they try and fit that into their current schema. And then if things that don't fit, they may attempt to revise and expand that schema. And that leads to new understanding. Now, if we're talking about change, change meaning maybe increased disability awareness or advocacy or any kind of major change, the way those things tend to happen are it's in two ways. A critical instance, that means a trauma or some kind of significant experience that causes them to pause and say, okay, well, what I'm thinking now is not um that needs some change, right? And then the other kind is, and this is how most scholarship works, is long-term exposure to stimuli. And that's both in language and action and in perception. And over time, as people are continuing to be stimulated by these things, they start to align with that stimulation, right? Now, there are some obstacles to that kind of meaning, to changing. You have your own personal biases, and regardless of what your experiences are, that bias pushes back, right? It's well, your subjective experience is what you know, what you've learned. It pushes back against change. There's also limitations of empathy, or really what I'm talking about here is theory of mind, is my ability to look at somebody else and understand their experiences, right? I try to fit their experiences into my current understanding, but my understanding doesn't can't adequately address that person's experience because I am not that person. And then we can think about like effects of privilege and power, especially whenever we're talking about autoethnographers or people who are doing research about people who are disempowered, disenfranchised, uh, it's easy to sort of skip over some of their internalized embodied experiences that guide their lives. And then finally, there's this inertia. And I use the word inertia is meaning that things don't change unless we're forced to change, right? It's easiest to stay still and to not move. Uh, and I think that affects a lot of how we create meaning. So taking all what I've just said about how we uh, expand our schemas and create meaning for ourselves, we have what we call the able-bodied lens, right? And in our world, in what we perceive to be reality, which is not necessarily reality, we construct a social life around doing things, right? Doing is normal and everything else is abnormal. And so when disabled people can't fit into that sort of normal doing, what else is left for them, right? They're just automatically abnormal. Everything they do then becomes evaluated against what is normal or returning back to normal. And because there's no other way to really evaluate these things because our perception of reality is so constructed on able-bodied things, right? And this is not necessarily a bad thing in itself. It's just a description of how we construct our realities. Uh, and, and then, everything that able-bodied people interpret, or even disabled people interpret, decisions, buildings, really everything is built upon an unavoidable concept of able-bodiedness. So therefore, anything that you pick up and look at, you are going to look at in some kind of able-bodied way. And that's what we call the able-bodied lens. And so when we think about the able-bodied lens, back to this blind woman about making her decision about getting a surgery that could cause her blindness, the automatic response is, of course she's going to get that surgery so she can see. But unless we really try to understand what is happening, that influence your decisions, we're not going to get that. We're not going to get at that because we can't see beyond sort of this, if this is the able-bodied lens. We can't, it's hard to look around it because it's just right there. So that's the problem I was addressing when I started this book was, okay, what we're doing is not effectively helping students or readers or other scholars to look beyond the lens. Uh, and part of that is because of writing itself, right? Writing is able-bodied, being able to write in ways that communicate well to others and to be able to read and to understand, all those things are connected to an assumption that the person can do those things, right? And then second of all, most disability studies scholars write to other scholars, or it can be in any discipline, right? Researchers write to other researchers. Uh, and if we're really trying to affect change, we have to move beyond talking to each other. We have to talk to everybody. So when we move us toward autoethnography, the writers they spend all this time crafting their narrative, making beautiful things that we read. But I'm worried that when somebody picks that up and reads it, they're watching versus participating. And what I mean by watching means they're sitting there on their comfy couch with their blanket and their cup of coffee, drinking it. They're like, oh, read that. Oh my God. That and they're watching the books and they're getting what the writers are saying, but until they can sort of cross that line to where they are experiencing it, they're not going to understand all those other things that affect decisions, such as, going back to the blind woman, that her idea of what blindness is and that how it is in her life, and fear of change and all these other things. If the reader is only watching that, they can only see it through their own perception. Uh, and I think these messages still work. I'm not critiquing autoethnographies, but they work more along the lines of the long-term stimuli that I was talking about. I would like to see somewhere a bit of a shift from just long-term stimuli to a little bit closer to a meaningful experience when they're reading, if we want to see our writing affect readers. So how I thought about doing this was I was reading as a kid, I really loved those choose your adventure books, right? You're reading and then all of a sudden you get to choose this or that, and then you turn to a page and you're like, oh, I just died because of the goblins killed me or whatever, and or I survived, turn to page 444, whatever it is. Because, and the reason why I like that and many other people and why that form of writing has lasted so many decades is it brings the reader into feeling that they are participating in decision making, right? They are they they don't really have those decisions because it's very limited, right? They get this, or this, but it gives the feeling of living it and of um, thinking about it and picking up pieces and looking at them and making decisions about that. And that leads, research shows, not a lot of research, not too many people have looked at this, but the existing literature shows that this kind of process helps readers feel engaged, and it causes change, right? It helps them reframe their thinking and more effectively helps them get into another person's shoes. Um, and then so the text itself is more effective, and because the readers are more engaged. Uh, there are very, very few autoethnographies that use the choose your own adventure format. There are a few, uh, but it's really not common. And I get that because as I'm writing, uh, applying that structure has caused some um, complexities in how I craft my narrative. But I think in the end, it's going to be a very good decision. And what my book is then is it's a book length autoethnography. There are 6 content chapters, plus intro, background, analysis, discussion, and so on and so forth. Uh, in each of those 6 content chapters, there's about 4,000 words of first person narrative. And in that narrative, present tense, I really resist talking as the omniscient uh, narrator and try to write from the person I was at that time. And I think that helps people. Uh, I think it helps in various ways, but it helps us understand that we make decisions in our lives based on available information under stress, in that situation, and not from this person way up here in the future looking down at their past. We make decisions in the moment. And so back to the structure is there's about 4,000 words of personal narrative, and then 2 places in each of those chapters, I stop the narrative and provide 3 options. Uh, for what I should do. One of those options is what I actually did. And then, they readers select a decision and they turn to associated page. And that page is first some some commentary by me, Steve. It's a conversation between myself, Steve, and Dr. Singer. And so I provide a little more context about my decisions and what was going on, and what guided my thoughts. And then I shifted to Dr. Singer, where I unpack what was happening, one aspect of what was happening in that decision-making process. And I draw from some case studies of other people with disabilities that had similar experiences, just to sort of um, root it in general knowledge. And then I conclude each of those discussions with the discussion prompts. And so, all in all, 6 chapters. We have what is that? So there's 6 options, and there's 36 different short discussions of about 1,000 words each in this decision structure of choose your own adventure. Uh, my objectives here are for readers, sort of a reiteration is for readers to participate in disabled decision making in a more real way. I mean, obviously it's still very, separated from real experience, but it makes one step closer. Uh, Misspelling there. I want readers to learn that decisions are subjective and affected by social constructs, right? We don't make decisions only based on what is best or these ideas. We make decisions based on how we're feeling at a time or our past experiences with things, various stressors, or what may be the fastest decision to escape suffering. And, there's all different kinds of things that affect how decisions make that are subjective, but also those decisions are made by the society in which we live. And I think that is part of what's missing from specifically disability narratives, but probably a wide range of topics in autoethnography. So I want to outline some of the structures for the readers and not make it only about me, but about some of the things some of the constructs that influenced my decisions. Uh, and I want them to feel uncomfortable. I want them to embrace the chaos. Writing is so nice and clear and paragraphs and structured in like sort of a linear way. And but that doesn't really mimic life. We do that because the reader has to understand what we're trying to communicate. And having this choose your own adventure format structure forces the readers to feel like, oh, I have to make decisions about what a person does and what's the outcome of that, what's going to happen, am I right, am I wrong? And it, that feels more like real life to me. And as a consequence, I hope it interrogates their understanding of what reality really is and not just their perception of reality. As I said, I've written a few draft chapters and a proposal, and it's under review right now. Uh, I feel confident that the book is going to make some progress and, probably come out in a year or two. Uh, but so coming back to you, other autoethnographers, I think this is a universal problem, right? Is readers look at the text and they try and make meaning from their own understanding, and they do their best. I'm not, but there's a disconnect, right, between what they read and what they think. And so this kind of approach, divergent path is a different way to say choose your own adventure, helps um, not only to write or to shift some of that skewed thinking, but also to explore a wider range of topics, right? There might be related things that you want to talk about in your autoethnographies that didn't really happen to you. And that's one of the sort of really benefits of my writing so far that I've noticed is there are things I want to say, but I didn't have space in my writing to talk about that topic. Or it's related, but it's not really the thing that happened to me. And having this form allows me to talk about those things, which I think is important. Um, so I'm really happy for any of you to contact me to talk about this more because I've not had much opportunity to talk to others. So feel free to email me. My email address is singers, my last name singers at TCNJ, the College of New Jersey, tcnj.edu. I'd love to have some conversations about this. And I hope you have a great conference. Take care.